NBC's latest mystery series Manifest is the breakout Netflix hit that takes us through the journey of the Montego Flight 828 passengers, who mysteriously disappeared on their way home from Jamaica in a lightning storm for 5.5 years. Only the catch is, for them, no time had passed, returning to a world that had essentially moved on from their assumed demise. So imagine if the plane from Malaysia that disappeared in 2014 turned up in 2020, that's pretty much the concept. This series takes many twists and turns that can leave someone very lost if they didn't closely pay attention. So in this series of videos I'm going to explain the first 3 seasons, especially the very jarring and mysterious ending to season 3. I'm also going to discuss potential theories as to what exactly happened on Flight 828, where the series could go after their abrupt cancellation a week before this recording, and of course, in typical reviewer fashion, I'm going to also be giving my critiques throughout on the show as a whole. So of course, if you guys want me to do a follow-up video where I review the series more like an album review I would do on my main channel, let me know in the comments below. But this video is going to end up being a long one, so let's just get straight into it. And real quick, if you haven't already guessed, major spoiler warnings for the entire series. The series' main characters are the Stone family, who were split in half on the day of the flight, with father Ben Stone, his sister Michaela, who is a cop, and his son Cal being subject to this unexplained event. Ben slowly turned into my favorite character in the series, along with fellow passenger Dr. Sonby Ball. Now yes, there are more main characters we will discuss, but these 4 are the series' main focus. On April 7, 2013, the family along with other passengers got ready for a routine flight back home to New York from Jamaica. This is where we get the series mantra from Michaela and Ben's mother, all things work together for good, which foreshadows not only the biblical nature of the event, but the way in which they can stop the forces at play. Before the flight is boarded, it's announced over the intercom that passengers on this flight can take $400 ticket vouchers if they take a later flight home instead, because this one was oversold. Because of Cal's cancer treatment costs, Ben jumps at the opportunity to take the vouchers, and his son Cal wants to be right beside him. Michaela follows suit because she's awaiting her boyfriend Jared, who's at home waiting for an answer to his marriage proposal. It doesn't help that she recently got into a car crash while drunk that in turn killed her best friend. I'm telling you guys, this is light compared to the rest. These characters go through some shit. As Ben and Michaela leave behind Cal's twin sister Olive, Ben's wife Grace, and their parents, they board Flight 828. Everything seems normal for the first half of the flight until they experience some major turbulence, which we later find out was a lightning storm that the captain of the flight flew right through, a move he was later heavily questioned by. Right after the turbulence, they are trying to get in contact with air traffic control and they seem very confused, telling them to land at a different airport. They are met with no service and a frenzy of police officers escorting them off the plane. This is where we meet the ensuing first bad guy with NSA agent Robert Vance, who tells them the problem is the flight left on April 7th of 2013, but today's date is November 4th of 2018, and that they've all been missing and presumed dead for 5.5 years. And I can honestly say that this concept had me hooked from the get-go, but I really wondered where they were going to be able to take this series, but luckily there was some very solid acting and the plot twists were suspenseful enough to keep me going. After being held in question for 36 hours, they return to their loved ones who meet them at the airport. Grace is there with Olive, who's now a full-grown teenager, and Ben and Michaela's dad. Jared and their mom are nowhere to be found because sadly their mother got sick and died, and then Jared married Michaela's other best friend, Lourdes. Man, they cannot catch a break. Vance and the US government immediately start testing on the plane, and the results say it's as if it had never left the sky. And while this is going on, we follow the Stone family as they try to adjust to normal life, and I really wish the series explored this more because even in 2013, technology was already really advanced. In 2018, we were living in a completely different world. And I felt like I left many funny and interesting situations out of the show. Like imagine showing someone from 2013 the newest iPhones or maybe what fashion looked like. But instead we just got some references to Fortnite, which really broke the fourth wall for me and took me out of it for a second. Michaela starts hearing a voice in her head that keeps telling her to set them free. It annoys her to the point of giving in and following it to wherever it leads. She winds up in front of a chained up auto shop where Ben rolls up right after saying he heard the same voice. Neither of them can explain why they are there, just that the voice led them and they knew where to go. 2 dogs are at the fence barking and they can only assume that they are the ones that they're supposed to let free, so they do, and the dogs just run away. The next day they are caught because of a complaint and they were right there on camera, but because of Michaela's job as a police officer and because they can get away with anything in this series, they're fine. They keep hearing the voice, meaning the job's not finished.
Job's not finished. Job finished? I don't think so.
She goes back and luckily enough, Jared is there questioning the owner about the break-in. The voice leads her to a locked up shed where surprisingly enough, 2 missing girls went there, proving the voice to be right. And at this very moment in episode 1, the series turned into a mix of Lost, NCIS, and Criminal Minds all at once. Michaela is praised but heavily suspected as having more information than she's giving. While this is going on, Cal is now a candidate for a new medical treatment for his cancer, which is being ran by none other than Sonby. And then we find out that Grace has been dating another man named Danny for a while now, and if the acting wasn't so good, I wouldn't care about side plots like these, but they actually add for some great content to fill out the rest of the series. At the end of the first episode, 20 of the passengers all of a sudden have an urge from this ominous voice telling them to go back to the plane. As they all meet each other and stare at the plane in bewilderment, it explodes. Because America's current national treasure randomly exploded and 20 of the passengers were present, they were immediately brought back in for questioning. After Michaela pulls the "Are we being detained" card, they're instructed to leave and not say a word about Flight 828 in a strict media blackout, instantly raising suspicion to the government's involvement. Ben keeps hearing this violin playing in his head, and it leads him to the busy streets in New York where he meets Rad, a man on the flight playing the same melody on his violin. He says he needs help because his son is in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and Rad knows that Ben's sister, Michaela, is a cop. And because the voices had worked before, they get to work. Now I don't know when Ben coined the term calling for when these voices and images lead you somewhere to solve a mystery, but I need to just start calling them that for the rest of this. Soon is where we see Ben start to form an obsession over solving what is happening to them, and this becomes a major part of his character arc over the series, because without him they do not get as far as they would, but we'll discuss that later. This extremely annoying passenger named Kelly of course has to go speak out on the news about her suspicions of the government's involvement, and this only leads to more trouble, and we will touch on what happened to her real soon. Ben and his daughter Olive go to a storage unit to retrieve all their old things that the family had to move on. Olive tells her dad that while they were disappeared, Olive knew that her twin Cal was alive. She just had a feeling. Ben suddenly hears the music again, and it leads him to a different storage unit that has evidence that proves Rad's son is innocent. He gets out, and the callings prove to be right once again. The secret of Danny comes out, and Ben takes it actually pretty well. Well, at first. Later, not so much. Michaela goes to meet Lourdes to talk about her marrying her best friend and try and hash that out, and the second episode ends with footage of Kelly at her house watching her 15 minutes of fame on the news until a bullet is shot through her head as blood splatters over the TV. It's a great visual for her consequences of breaking her silence. After she is found dead, all other 828 passengers are understandably concerned. Ben talks with Sanvi and she reveals that while testing Cal's blood, she found a protein marker that wasn't there before the flight. A calling of Own Your Truth leads Ben and Michaela back on the hunt to Kelly, where they find out she was also hearing callings before her death. Her husband and housekeeper explain that she was acting very strange leading up to her death, and they also reveal that they saw black SUVs waiting outside her house at night, confirming Kelly's suspicions. This stirs up Michaela's emotions about her car crash, and she goes to see the parents of her dead friend. And now her mom has developed some sort of memory loss and still thinks her daughter is alive. We pan over to Vance, and now he's asking questions around the precinct, asking for Michaela and especially her miraculous discovery of the two missing girls. He asks Jared to watch Michaela and give Vance regular reports, which Jared is very skeptical, but agrees to. Well, it turns out that Kelly's husband was doing illegal business and he is now brought in for questioning as a suspect to his wife's murders, but they are convinced that the killer is his Flight 828 worshiper Isaiah, who said he had a calling that brought him to Kelly's dead body, and that he tried to save her but ran away when he heard the cops. After leaving, Michaela has a flashback of the night of her car accident, and it turns out she tried to get her friend a cab, but she didn't want to leave her car, so Michaela drove instead. She goes to see her friend's parents, and her mom had wandered off into the street, and a car almost hits her, but Michaela gets in the way and wrecks into Kelly's housekeeper, of all people, who is carrying the missing necklace from the night of Kelly's death. The callings do it again. Turns out the housekeeper went crazy and got jealous of Kelly. Ben gets a call from Sanvi and she discovers that the marker in Cal's blood was on par with that of a stroke victim, suggesting all the passenger's body went through a stroke or possibly died and came back to life. A strong theory throughout the entire show. They want to get brain tissue from Kelly's dead body, but it's nowhere to be found, correctly assumed to be taken by the government. Episode 4 takes a focus on Bethany, a stewardess on Flight 828 who was actually smuggling her cousin from Jamaica onto the flight. He was faking as another worker on the plane, but when they landed to a sea of police officers, he had to tuck and roll out of the bottom of the plane and run. Because he wasn't informed of the 5.5-year disappearance, had nowhere to go, and was now hearing voices in his head, he was taken into a psych ward. Sanvi experiences her first visual calling of a stone statue of a woman that leaves behind wet footprints. And of course, it leads her to Bethany's cousin in the psych ward. The calling has officially began. While they are filling out the rest of the episode, Mick, which is what I'm calling her for the rest of this because I still can't spell Michaela, is tasked with Jared to wait out at a sting operation. But a calling causes her to prematurely step in and almost jeopardizes Jared's career when he covers for her because he is still clearly in love with her. Mick also had seen the same statue of a woman and a voice saying "save him," which she thought was for the operation but was actually for Bethany's cousin. Ben tries to mathematically save the family from debt and in the middle of this meets Danny, so while he's busy with that, Sanvi goes to meet with Bethany and help her. But the NSA? They're already on it. Mick comes to the rescue and they find him at a fountain with the same statue woman and bring him to this underground boiler room, and it's right by the subway and he's gonna hide out there before Bethany can get him to safety at her cabin. Episode 5 starts with the aftermath of April 7, 2013 and how the family found out the plane went missing. We jump back to the boiler room where Ben is growing increasingly paranoid about holding Bethany's cousin Thomas, who's now a fugitive. And I just want to say real quick, I absolutely love Thomas's character. His Jamaican accent and how nice he is made me really want him to make it out safe. Ben now wants to walk away because he doesn't want to get in trouble, but a calling tells him it's all connected. Ben goes and spends time with Cal and they decide what to do on their day out by the flip of a coin. As their journey continues, Cal has a sudden urge to run through the subway system, which eventually leads them right back to Thomas, showing Ben that he can't escape the callings before finishing them. The episode cuts back and forth for more aftermath of the disappearance, and you really can't blame Grace for getting with Danny. He's a great guy. Jared, on the other hand, is still pretty damn foul for marrying Mick's best friend. Vance takes Bethany in for questioning about her cousin because she was seen on surveillance cameras letting him free from the psych ward. It's now up to Ben and Cal to save Thomas. But luckily, Bethany's wife found them and took Thomas to their cabin out in the woods. Thank God Thomas made it out safe, I think. They never really explained what happened to him after that. The series has a tendency to never really revisit side plots, but if they did, the series would just be way too long, so I kinda get it. The episode ends with Ben starting his beautiful mind map in his garage, showing he is now fully convinced after his own son had a calling. It flashes back to the plane ride and we see Cal saw a bright light beaming out of the sky before they hit the turbulence, and he utters the phrase, "It's all connected." And in my first time watching the series, I thought Cal was a little creepy, kinda on some Omen shit, but he turns out to be a key element in the story. Episode 6 starts off with Cal having a night terror where he's screaming something in another language which turns out to be Bulgarian. We cut to a flight where a Bulgarian man was walking around asking for someone to help him out with his customs forms. Cal is then brought to the hospital because he is now extremely sick, and of course they assume it's something to do with his cancer. He has another episode and Zombie recognizes the language and phrase from the man on the plane. The new calling has begun. Ben instantly knows it's connected to why he's sick. It turns out that after the plane landed, buses took them to the next location, but a fifth bus was unaccounted for. This contained mostly foreign nationals or people who returned to no family, and now this bus full of people are missing, presumably taken by the government. Ben uses his skills to find all the possible locations the missing bus could have gone after it went off the grid. Mick and Jared go to investigate but are stopped by military officers, but not too early for Mick to get pictures of the location and patients being led into the building with a big red door. Cal remembers this door from one of his night terrors, and all these clues lead Ben to want to talk straight to the source. So, he goes and talks to Vance. He accuses him of taking the passengers to this farm, but they don't know anything about it. They even tried to reach out to some of the missing victims. Ben doesn't believe them and leaves, but they really don't know what he's talking about, so they urge more surveillance on him to see where he's heading and even look into some of his claims. As Cal gets worse, we find out that those missing passengers are actually being tested on at that farm, and Cal's connected to this Bulgarian man there. Vance and the NSA go to check out the farm from mixed pictures, and it's completely empty. Someone knew they were coming. Ben continues to do a deep dive and gets a job working for an accounting company that had something to do with selling that property. He gets in with his coworkers and pulls off some maneuvers to get some documents from his boss's computer. As always, the NSA is already one step ahead, and they are curious as to why Ben took this job in the first place, and then they find out the same connection to the farm that he did. They order a security checkpoint to stop Ben, and as he tries to hide the evidence, he gets a text telling him to walk to the left. It's Vancey Boy. Now there's so many smaller subplots that happen that I can't fully explain each one or we will be here forever. So Mick gets a calling that leads her to find the person who received the heart from her best friend after she died because it was donated. This calling leads her to stop another crime in typical NCIS fashion. Ben and Zombie, aka the dynamic duo, because they're the ones who get shit done on the series, and whenever they are on screen I'm absolutely hooked because they always bring facts to the table and they also have the best research. But they find out about a Swedish scientist who is on Flight 828 as well and is studying similar subjects to the tests being ran on the passengers and overall what's happening to them. They bring in the idea of a collective consciousness and they're trying to develop it, not knowing that this is what's happening to the 828ers. Then Cal with his creepy ass self tells Ben he's not a bad guy anymore, referring to Vance who is now convinced of Ben's theories. Next episode we see that there are now a bunch of conspiracy blogs about Flight 828 and it's pretty accurate to what would happen in real life if something like this happened. I mean, if people vanished for 5 years but it was only a couple hours for them, YouTube would be flooded with the truth about Flight 828 videos. Ben is stopped by Vance after a fire alarm goes off at his work and he smashes his phone and says that they need each other. Vancey Boy is now on the team. And at the same time, the Swedish scientist now joins the team because she can actually add a lot with her studies, and Ben and Zombie trust her, so at this point in the show, I trusted her too. Another side mission happens when a passenger who jumps to his death from a building thought that whenever he told someone about his callings, they would die, presenting a new possible danger. Vance and Ben use the Swedish scientist to bug a room with some government officials interested in her research, and after she leaves, they hear a phone call about the Major, who is now our new bad guy and the person at the forefront of this government conspiracy. They also hear on the phone call that the missing passengers being tested on have been moved to Brooklyn. They track down the location and get ready to set up a sting operation, but the clock is ticking because now that the test is resumed, Cal is getting worse. This random lady from Flight 828 stumbles onto Ben's lawn saying that she needs his help, so he takes her to Sonvi and the Swedish scientist, and they find out that she has injuries suggesting she was being tested on with the missing passengers. They bring in Vance and she explains what was happening to them at the testing facilities and how they got there. They go through another test and now Cal and this lady are feeling the effects, so they decide to start the mission now. When they arrive, they can't find anything, and as they're about to give up, Cal shows up and turns out his drawings are images he's seeing through other people and allows for him to almost tell the future. As he leads them to the actual location of the test subjects, they find him and save the day through this intense action sequence that leaves Vance dead in a fiery explosion. Man, I was really starting to like this guy. Cal being a part of this sent Grace over the edge, and now Ben is in the literal doghouse and has to move out because she can't handle this anymore. Little does she know, this is just the beginning. As the episode ends, it turns out the lady who stumbled onto Ben's lawn was actually sent by the government to spy on him, Mick, and Vance. The test subjects are taken by Zombie and the scientists to do further research, and after they all have the same exact muscle spasm at the same exact time, they are now closer to proving that they share a collective consciousness along with the other Flight 828 passengers. Ben goes to Vance's funeral and is stopped by an amateur reporter who runs a conspiracy podcast about 828. He'll come into play later. A group called the Believers are now harassing the passengers and are worshipping them like a cult. So some of the passengers meet up with the rest of the crew and try and get to the bottom of these callings. The lady spying on them from earlier actually turns out to be useful and gives Ben some information about the Major and that they are looking for the Holy Grail, a term Ben hears the podcaster use shortly after, so he goes and questions him. A source told the podcaster that after the flight, government officials were having secret meetings, and through an overheard conversation, the source said that they heard them say that they need the Holy Grail first or 828 will blow up in their face. As Ben tries to talk with Vance's partner, we cut to another passenger, Adrian, who is stopped by some of the Believers, and they are so enamored with him they ask to simply just touch him. Vance's partner agrees to help Ben and gives him some inside information on how to break in. So Ben goes and gives a recorded statement to the podcaster as an insurance policy in case he dies in there. Zombie finds out that the experiments prove that some passengers are more sensitive to the callings, and the crew thinks Cal is what they are after because of his capabilities. Episode 10 ends with Cal having a calling of a man in the snow as his own hands start to get frostbitten. The next episode starts with the viewpoint of the captain of the plane and what he saw when he flew through the storm. He calls up Ben to show him that he has been trying to recreate the conditions of that night into a flight simulator, but he can't get the exact weather report to recreate. As they find a meteorologist who recorded the weather that night, he tells him that the government questioned him and took all the files, but he was smart and he made an extra copy. With the right reports, they were able to recreate the night into a simulator, but it crashes every time, saying that if this were to occur, the plane would have gone down. The captain goes off the rails, drugs and kidnaps his Swedish scientist, and finds when the next storm will be so he can fly through it again. He believes that the phenomenon of dark lightning is the cause of this and that the scientist knows about it. As they fly into the storm, they seemingly disappear into thin air and are sent back to wherever they were on Flight 828. Autumn, who is the lady from before who was spying on them, learns about Cal's abilities, and this in turn makes him the main target. Cal gets the calling of the man in the snow again and runs away from home to follow it. As the family rushes for answers, they look at Cal's drawings, and he had predicted that this was going to happen. So they use his drawings as a map of sorts to find where he's being held. They find him in a cabin in the woods where he's saying he's waiting for someone, right after a man barges in and collapses to the floor, nearly frozen to death. After he comes to, Mick shows up and the man named Zeke recognizes her and knows her name. He tells her that when he was in the blizzard he found a cave but was eventually packed in by more snow. He had a magazine with a picture of Mick and for some reason he held on to it and clung to it for hope, feeling like he had to find her. Mick had been following a voice in her head saying find her for days, but it turns out she was hearing Zeke's voice. And to add to all this craziness, Zeke thought he was missing for 2 weeks, but it actually had been a full year since he disappeared, suggesting he was a subject to the same phenomena that happened to Flight 828. Ben's paranoia gets the best of him again and he doesn't trust Zeke, but Mick and Cal trust him because of the calling. Ben is smart though and he took some bandages from Zeke with his blood on it so Zombie can test it to see if he has the same blood marker as the 828ers. As they leave the hospital, they see a billboard saying 828 are the human, with a big X over the picture of the plane. This turns out to be a warning because later that same day someone threw a brick through Ben's window and painted a red X on their front door. As Mick continues to search for more information about Zeke, she finds out that his younger sister died on that same mountain he was trapped at 6 years ago, questioning why Zeke was up there in the first place and no one knew. Possibly to kill himself? Either way, she questions him about it and she finally gains his trust, and you can tell from day one, we're gonna fuck. He takes her back to the cave and they get another calling telling them to go back. This is where Zeke reveals to Mick that he accidentally let his sister drown in a ravine nearby the cave and he was going to see her memorial as part of his healing during his addiction recovery. The calling was leading them there, not the cave. And while this is happening, Jared and Ben are trying to find who painted the X on the door, and this leads them to a man who runs a 828 hate website. Ben goes home and sees Olive is reading a book for her mythology class and it's turned to a page with a peacock. Ben then remembers a few weeks prior he had seen a calling of a peacock but brushed it off because there weren't any other clues. This begins the search for the mythological and symbolic connections throughout the course of the show because the peacock apparently represents resurrection or dying and coming back to life. You can see where the creators are going with this. This is cut abruptly because Ben needs to go meet with the man who runs the website. This turns into a confrontation that is live streamed from someone's phone, a nod to our social and political climate, something they touch on a lot throughout this series. Ben is at fault though in this situation, and a restraining order is filed against him from the guy with the hate website. The episode ends with Mick and Zeke and they get the go back calling again, meaning they still have more work to do together. So Zeke agrees to go home with her and get ready to re-enter the real world. Oh yeah, remember Adrian, the passenger that was touched by the Believers? Yeah, he decides to take full advantage of them and starts the Church of the Returned. So now we have the Returned themselves going against the government and trying to solve a supernatural mystery, then the believers and the worshippers, who are now the Church of the Returned, and then the hate groups that the characters now dub the moniker Xers, that think the passengers are lying and are some sort of evil. Zeke has a calling of a wolf attacking him, and Cal sees it in his nightmare, and in typical creepy Cal fashion, he tells his parents, "It's coming." This episode is jam-packed with Grace finding out she's pregnant and they don't know who the father is. Sanvi gets kidnapped by a crazy lady with a sick husband who thinks she can magically cure him because she's one of the Returned. Then Ben finds out about Adrian's church and goes to confront him, and he admits he's lying to exploit the believers. Olive finds out some more mythological shit about Geminis and twins. And the Major and her team are almost ready to close in on Cal, aka the Holy Grail. Oh, and Jared and Lourdes split up because he cheated with Mick. Just some extra drama to throw in there. This insane episode ends with the police finding a car in the ocean from a robbery 3 days prior, and the driver inside wakes up after being dead for that same amount of time. Looks like Zeke and the 828ers aren't the only ones who can come back to life. The man's name is Griffin, and he drove off into the water after escaping a bank robbery and killing his 2 partners. While in the hospital, he has a calling of an explosion in planes, but before he can explain further, they sedate him. When he comes to, Mick questions him so they can prevent the bombing because they figured out by now that these callings can tell the future. He sees this as an opportunity to buy himself some less jail time if he helps with the case, so he isn't talking until they strike a deal. Grace and Olive want to become part of the team, so they get to researching on Griffin, and we get another fourth wall break with Olive talking about MySpace. They find out that Griffin was in foster care, and they reach out to his foster mom to try and talk to him. It turns out that he was responsible for pinning his foster brother with the murder, and this connects him to Zeke and Mick because after his brother died, he never got closure, meaning that he was meant to end up in this situation. He ends up striking a deal with the cops to stop the bombing and becomes a hero because of it, and now wants to go public with his information on the callings to further his newfound fame. And if we remember from the jumper from earlier, bad things happen when you go public with the callings. And they keep getting warned of this by the wolf callings, the stop him callings, and the it's coming from Creepy Cow. And guess what? Griffin has the blood marker too, but I'm sure you could probably already guess that. Sanvi's coworker recommends her to a therapist because she's clearly going through something, but remember this detail because it'll pop up again in season 2. Zeke goes to Cal to find out more about the wolf calling, and Cal shows him a drawing of Ben, Mick, and his own tombstone from a vision he had. As they get ready to stop Griffin from going public with the callings, out of nowhere he begins to profusely vomit water in a really cool visual way with the graphics. I mean, it's more water than could fit in his own body. He then collapses and dies on scene. Good timing, right? Well, actually, it was very specific timing because it was actually 82 hours and 8 minutes, or 828, from when he was resurrected. Also the same amount of time that he was dead. So now the new threat and the new rule has been established that however long you were gone/dead, that's how long you have to live. And the way you die is the way you died the first time. So for Griffin, he drowned underwater, and now his body acted as if it were drowning from the inside. Ben just loves naming things, and he refers to this as each individual's death date. This means Zeke has a year and the 828 passengers have 5.5. Ben does this math and calculates that June 2nd, 2024 is their death date, but Olive points out it's been in front of them this whole time. The peacock has a connection to the goddess Juno, representing June. The Gemini constellation that was also found at Zeke's cave represents 2, and 2024 is the year the dragon that Cal was making out of popsicle sticks or something. I don't know. Something he saw in one of his visions that he never talks about because he's creepy. He has this tendency where he just creates his callings instead of explaining them. I don't know why. Cal tells the family that he already knew when they were going to die too because he saw the tombstones again, but this time he saw the date, June 2nd, 2024. He just didn't know how to tell them. Next, before season 1 comes to an end, we see Sanvi meet with her therapist for the first time, and it's who else but the Major herself. Meaning her co-worker was placed there on the inside to get information on her testing and to get her to go to his therapist, which is really just a trap for her to spill everything to the Major. This whole time Jared has clearly been jealous of Zeke, but he's also sus of him too, so he goes to Mick's apartment to tell her about him and what he's found on his record. But she's out looking for Zeke, so we get this battle of the boyfriends between Jared and Zeke, and as the gun gets taken out and they are fighting over it, the gun goes off and we look to see who it hit, and the season ends with Mick at the front door staring at them too, and we don't know what happens. Alright, so that wraps up season 1 of Manifest, and I can honestly say I really like this series, but there were some minor issues I had with it. Like from the get-go, the pacing was a little off. Like sometimes it would jump, I felt like a couple weeks up to a month, and it acted like it was just a day. And then there was a lot of storylines that was really hard to keep track of if you didn't like really pay attention and take mental notes of everything that happened. I happened to just take, physical notes for the video. And then the last 3 episodes compared to the rest, I mean, we were talking about the pacing, the rest of the season, 1 through, I think it was 14, 1 through 13. You're really digesting all this new information. There's all these new characters, all these new storylines being added, and then the last 3 episodes, it was just boom, boom, every single scene. scene, everything jam-packed, all this new information, and it's good in that aspect that it hooks you. You know, they want you to come back for season 2, and I think season 1 does do a good job of that. But you know, if we're just talking objectively of only season 1, you know, if you're only watching that, the end of it's like, Jesus, so you know, all this shit happened at once, I need to figure it all out. And that's kind of, you know, what led me to making this video. I mean, as you can tell, this is the first one of its kind on this new channel. If you don't know, I already have a main channel, Vision Forever Entertainment, where I do all music related things, you know, so I wanted to switch it over, bring it over here, and just do, it's weird to not say music, movie and TV shows. And for some reason, Manifest was just the first one that did it, and I wanted to go at it, you know, like a music review, so I wanted to review it throughout the entire thing as I explained it. But honestly, with season 1, I mean, it's filmed like an NBC CBS show. Like I referenced NCIS a lot of times, when it comes to like the type of camera they use, the cuts, you know, a lot of the dialogue too, a lot of the dialogue specifically. Sometimes you're like, yeah, I don't know if that's the move right there, but I mean, most of the time it's fine, it works. And then every commercial break is like a cliffhanger, and the end of every episode is a cliffhanger. I mean, it has the same formula to a lot of different shows, but it's not that big of an issue, you know. There really aren't a lot of things that draw me away from it. Them trying to target to Gen Z and like trying to force a target audience, kind of, that's the only thing where I was like, okay, that took me out of it. I know I said it broke the fourth wall when they brought up Fortnite. I don't know why. Just hearing Fortnite, I just was like, I'd come to TV shows and movies to escape from reality. Yes, it can be very similar, it can add in elements of real life and stuff, but I don't want to hear someone reference Fortnite when I'm watching a mystery drama, you know what I mean? And then things with like PC culture, you know, just like social commentary and everything. Sometimes they were good, and the other times I felt like they fell really short, and I was like, it feels too forced for me. But all in all, I really enjoyed season 1. I did not know there would be this much to discuss. I'm sorry that this video came out being probably 25 minutes up to 30 minutes in length, but the next ones will not be that long because it's a lot more fast paced. I've already seen season 2 and season 3, as you can assume, but they're going to be a lot more fast paced, and we already know the characters, you know, we have everything set. But for season 1, I had to introduce everybody, and season 1, I mean, they got to do it. They just got to set everything, set the tone, you know, tell you what everything's about. But I'm here to try to deep dive into the rest of it, you know, really go in depth on every single episode, kind of get some things that you might have missed. You know, for me, going back and rewatching them and taking the notes and really watching everything, it made for a very enjoyable experience. You know, it wasn't bad at all just because I really liked the show, but it made me realize and see so much more about the theories behind it, and I was like, the only way I can talk about this is if I turn the camera on and make a video, so that's what I did. And I'm still getting used to, you know, talking and having a script and notes at the same time, but for the rest of this, because I have it laid out, you know, exactly what's going on, just so we can recap and really figure out what are we trying to figure out with this show. So bear with me, but I gotta just read this straight from what it is. So right now we have the possibility that they were either resurrected, maybe they were like supernatural forces at play, aliens or something. There are a lot of biblical references and theories, and that kind of goes back to the whole resurrection, if you remember the peacock. Then we got these callings or visions and voices in their head that the passengers and other people from Flight 828, but specifically the passengers, they can like tell the future, they're helping stop crime. And of course, right from the get-go, there's government involvement at the highest level. I mean, Robert Vance, he's in the NSA and he's working with them, so they're going to the highest government level. So then you have that threat, you have the threat of the death date, that however long you were gone, you were disappeared, that's how long you have left to live, and then you die the same way that you supposedly died the first time. And then we have these fucking hate groups who are going around like terrorizing people and saying like they think they're evil, and again, a lot of biblical references, a lot of people are saying that they're demons and evil and they're, you know, playing God and all this shit. But there's just so much more to explore in season 2, and in season 3 there's a lot. But in season 2 we got, why is Cal so special? Who is the Major and what the hell is she planning? What is the damn connection to the peacock? Where are these callings coming from? What is the protein blood marker? I said protein blood marker like I knew what was going on. I have no idea. I have no idea what these blood marker and all this scientific shit is. And then how did what happened to Flight 828 happen to Zeke and Griffin? You know, it's happening to other random people. It's not just a one-time occurrence. Maybe they're not random, but again, we're gonna have to find out in the next video, because if I tried to make this all one, it'd probably be an hour and a half long. But we're gonna continue to try to answer those, and I'm not gonna have all this background, all this filler information from myself, the video, and overall the season, because this is just a framework for, you know, the whole video series and the series overall. But for this video, because it's the first one and it's on a new channel, if you're coming over for the other one, Vision Forever Entertainment, again, of course, I'll put that link in the description below, but if you're coming from there, thank you for supporting all the way. But for this one, I don't care how many subscribers or how many likes it gets by a certain time, but I would like for this video, the Manifest Season 1 explanation recap, whatever I call it, to get about 500 views first. And again, not in a specific amount of time if it takes too long. I already got all this shit planned, ready to go. I'm just gonna do it either way, but I would hope within like 2 weeks, if we can get it to 500 views, I'm gonna just come right back with another one. Cause like I said, I've worked on this this entire show, watched this shit 3-4 times start to finish. I've done too much for me not to just do the whole video series. But make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification button for me so you can be notified when this future video drops. But other than that, I'll see y'all later.